One of the primary reasons that we write functions is so that we can use them in multiple scripts. Without having to write the same script over and over, we can put it in a function and use it whenever we need it in separate scripts. So let's talk about how to do this, how to use functions in multiple scripts. The examples that I've been using so far were kept simple and silly to introduce the concept of functions. Now it's time to look at a more useful but necessarily more complex user-defined function. This function will calculate the power or sample size for a one-sided binomial test. Now, if you've not taken a course in nonparametric statistics, you may not know about the binomial test. That's okay. I'm not going to focus here on the statistical aspects of this. Rather, I'm showing you a practical function and how we can use it and how we can make it available for multiple scripts. This binomial power function will look at the power for a one-sided upper tail test. The arguments that we need to send to this function are a null hypothesized value, an alternative hypothesis, and remember, when you want to calculate power, you need a specific alternative hypothesis, not just that the parameter is greater than something. Then we need to provide either the sample size, in which case it will give us power, or the power, in which case it will calculate the sample size. We have an indicator here to indicate which one of those it is. When sample size is equal to true, we're going to provide the sample size and it's going to give us the power. When sample size is equal to false, we're going to give it the power and it's going to tell us what sample size we need, and then a confidence level. Here is a function within the function that's going to calculate power from sample size, and here's a function within the function that is going to calculate sample size for desired power. So what happens down here is if sample size is true, then we're going to call the power function. That is, we're giving it the sample size and we need the power. Else, if it's not true, we're going to call the get sample size function. So we're giving it the power and it's giving us the sample size, and then it's going to return the result. All right, let's try calling this function with a couple sample sizes. Again, you probably don't understand or may not understand it, depending upon what statistics classes you've had, what binomial distributions are and what the power is, but that's okay. What I'm doing here is I'm using a null hypothesis of 0.5. So this is for a proportion. I'm putting an alternative hypothesis of 0.8, and I'm going to give it a sample size of 40. And when I call that, it's not going to work because I haven't loaded this function yet. So here we go again. Now let's try it. So let's try calling this. And it gave us a power of 0.99 or 99% power. If I decrease the alternative hypothesis to be a lot closer to our null hypothesis, it won't give me as much power. Look at that, it dropped all the way from 99%, which is very good, to 32%, which is very bad. Let's try calling this function for desired power. So let's say I want 80% power, so I'm going to set sample size to false because I'm providing the power. And with 0.8, I only need 18. Remember, with 40 before we got 99%. For 0.6, in which with 40 I had 32%, I really need 158 participants in order to get 80% power. If I want to do the binom up power function the other way around, I can put in that 158 that I just calculated and now put in 0.6 and see what power it gives me, and sure enough, it's 80% power. So I did it both ways to kind of verify that it works. All right, so there's a very useful function for someone who might need to calculate power with a binomial test. So now that we have that nice function that will get us the power for a binomial test, even if we don't know what a binomial test is, how do we call that function when we need it? How do we use that without writing it into our scripts? Well, one way that might occur to you is we could take and copy all of this information, all of this function. Let me go ahead and highlight it all. It goes down to about here. We could take that and we could cut and paste it into a script. And I've done exactly that. If you look at my files, this is home base here. Notice that in addition to my notebooks and my scripts and my data, I now have a functions folder. And you're going to want to do the same thing. Create a folder of functions. So here's my functions folder, and right now it's just got one function in it, the one we just wrote, binomial upper power. If I click on that, you see I have the function in there. Now what I could do is I could copy it all, and then anytime I need it, I could go to where I need it and I could paste it. And every time I need it again, I could paste it again, and I could paste it again. And that's going to be a bit messy. There is a much better way. And that much better way is called sourcing. We can clean up our code by copying the above function to a separate script file. We've done that. We'll access this function by using the source function at the top of our main script or notebook. So I actually have a notebook in which I am going to show you an example of sourcing. Here it is. So notice how this works. We can include the source function much like we use library functions. Here are both of them in action. I'm going to use the here library. What happens when I click on line 13, when I run line 13? What happens is that it makes all the functions that are in library here available to us. Similarly, when I source in a script, any functions that are in that script are made available to us. So here I have just one function in my script. When I source it in, look it over in my environment. It's now available to us. And now I can run the exact same commands you saw me run before in this code chunk without all the messiness. The only thing I have is that one line calling that function, and all of this will run. And I can get all the output that I got before for running each of those functions. Isn't that nice? So you can think of your functions folder as your own personal library of user-defined functions. You can put more than one function in a script, and when you source in that script, all those functions are going to be available to you. Now, I would suggest having separate scripts for different types of functions. But if you have, say, 2 or 3 or 5 functions that all do similar kinds of things, or they're all about the same kind of topic, you might want to put them all in one script file and make all those functions available to you whenever you source that in. So yes, we can copy the function and paste it into the script. It must proceed the first time you call the function, and good practice is to put it right near the beginning of the script. But better yet, keep the function in a file and use the source function to bring it in. Eventually, you might want to learn how to create a package. And a package is just a formal, slick way of putting a bunch of functions together. You install the package before first use and use the library function to load the package. And we can create packages with user-defined functions. In fact, all the packages that we use from other people, they're user-defined functions that they created, and they're just giving them to us in the form of a package.